Assalamu alaikum. We meet again discussing something about the books of Hadith, and I've been attempting to translate not the full book, but just to give you a little bit of a brief quotes and discuss this book, Sahih Bukhari, Nihayat al-Ustura, by Rashid Ilal, published in Morocco. As I've told you before, this book created and still is creating a lot of discussion within the religious communities in Morocco and throughout the Middle East. It's a very interesting book. It's one of many books in the Middle East that tackles the issue of Hadith, the sciences related to the Hadith, and why some of these books really warn about the accuracy of the Hadith books and how important they have become in our daily lives. So it is very important for us to really understand where did they come from, who wrote them, when they were written. It's a very sensitive topic that creates a lot of emotions. People accuse you or accuse anyone that is tackling the accuracy of Sahih Bukhari or Sahih Muslim or some of these many books of Hadith are being blasphemous, and in many cases people died for it. People were stripped of their dignity or scholarly work because of the subject. So I'll continue talking about this book, and I also want to remind you that you don't have to take anything that I say here with like seriously. You just take what I'm trying to deliver to you from this book and think about it. Do your own search. Don't believe what even this author said, but you gotta take what he and others says about these books very seriously and do your own due diligence, your own research, study it, analyze it, and see if it makes sense to you. If it does, good for you. If it doesn't, you move on. Today I'm going to be talking about, the word hadith itself. It's mentioned in the Quran numerous times. I don't even know, 10, 20, 15, but it's more than 5 times it's mentioned in the Quran. The word itself, hadith. So what does the Quran mean when it mentioned the word hadith? It is basically the word itself. Hadith in the Quran means are the words of Allah that were revealed to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says فَبِأَيِّ hadith, in what hadith they do, or if you're sitting among people, if they don't change their hadith, then you leave. So the word hadith in itself means the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It does not refer to the books of hadith or what the Prophet said. It is basically saying that these are the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Unlike today, when you mention the word hadith, the first thing comes to mind of a Muslim is the words of the Prophet. But on the contrary, it should have been the other way around. When you hear the word hadith, the first thing should come to your mind is basically the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not the words of the Prophet Muhammad. This over time, the words and the psychology of Muslim changes and gets influenced by something that is not intended to be in the Quran. but the cultural influences and the dominant vocabulary takes over, and it changes a lot of things for Muslims. And the same thing happened with that word. So now we have, when you say hadith, it's not the words of Allah, it's the words of the Prophet, or the companions of the Prophet, or people that came after them, from whatever they said, whatever they did, whatever resolution, whatever commitment, whatever description, their personal lifestyle, narration. So that is what has become the word hadith mean. But we should really go back to its original intent in the Quran. Is when you hear the word hadith, the first thing that should comes to mind, oh, what did Allah say? So instead, now we go and we say, oh, what did the Prophet said? And that's wrong. So now, of course, we have the science of hadith now, and it branched into complicated, many different fields. And one of those fields is the science of hadith. And the sciences of hadith are not really, their focus is not the science of studying the Quran, but the science of studying the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, and now it evolved into Sanad al-Hadith, Sanad, who said this hadith, from who said it. In some instances, 9 generations of people narrated the story, and who can we give Sanad to basically be the person responsible for that. To me personally, it has become to believe in that 9 generations of stories from one to one to one to one, many hundreds of many years, generations among them. I just don't believe it personally. I think it's one of the biggest misinformed facts in Islam. But that's just my opinion. The delusion around it is just incredible, but it is what it is. And just, how many times a person that came and told you a story, just fresh story, and you just turned around, told your brother, your friends, the story, just a little bit of twisted facts in there. If he would have told you, $500, you would make it $550 or $600. Somebody told you a story, or imagine you telling your wife something, or your friend, and she goes and tells her sister, her mom, and the story completely, absolutely changes. It does not stay the same. There is no way the human factor here does not play a role. It does. Not only the human factor, geographical factor. It used to be to go from Medina to Baghdad. It was weeks and weeks of travel on camels and mules. And it was just hardship, the location, the environment, the political turmoil after the death of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All hadith books were written at the time of the Abbasi period, 150 to 200 years after the death of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they were completely disconnected from the original person that heard it firsthand from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Remember, we discussed before that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked the companions not to write anything about him, and Umar burned those books of people that tried to write the hadith. But just in case, if it was permitted, it was years later. So it was this concept of, that came, jarh and ta'dil, they call it, to criticize one or to evaluate another one. And it was not scientific. It was not like chemistry. You have to adhere to the principles of of chemistry, in terms of heat, in terms of the environment. It wasn't like if it's a scientific fact, let's say. People compare the hadith science into chemistry. Like if you do a water to put hydrogen and oxygen bonds together in Morocco, it should work in China, it should work in America, it should have a standard. But in this jarh and ta'dil, this the dismissing one person and giving credibility to another person, it was based on just a personal opinion, personal culture, personal tribe, personal knowledge, personal liking, disliking of the person. Some people say, "Oh, this person is legit," and some people say this person is not legit, and it all involves human opinions, cultural background, loyalty to certain things, and facts. Look at us. We live in the age of constant 24-hour connectivity. We have TV, we have social media, we have video cameras, we have cell phones, we have everything. And we have people videotaping cops killing people on camera. And we have society that, even seeing that, have disputes about these facts. Can you imagine that at the time that every communication was so primitive, people were isolated from one another? People valued loyalty to the tribe, listened to some superstitions in a lot of different things. So the science of hadith, yeah, it has the word of science in there, but it actually is not scientific at all. It depends on human factor, big time. Sorry, enjoying my coffee. It's morning for me. So the science of hadith depends on the isnad, like who narrated that particular hadith. But before we talk about isnad, we need to talk about what is called ilm al-rijal, knowledge of men. It's part of ilm al-hadith that you need to know who are these men that narrated these hadiths. So these people that narrated the hadith, there are people specializing in studying them, knowing them, evaluating them, and categorizing them. He's a liar, he's so and so, he did this, he did that, and they base their stories of that individual based on, I trust this guy and he told me about that guy. So because this guy is trustworthy, I have to take his word that Abdullah said it. And not only Abdullah said it, but Abdullah heard it from Osman, and Osman heard it from Omar. So, it's based on me, actually. It's not like you have to give him a lie detector test, okay? You hook him up to a machine, and you ask him the question, and you will find out whether he's saying the truth or not. No, it was based, he is from my tribe. I know him, he was in this battle, or, he used to work for this guy, so I trust this guy. So I'm going to believe his story. So, and, when I was reading about this, and I came across one poet that was walking down at the time of Khalifa al-Ma'mun, and he was eating while he was walking. It was a big insult and no in the culture to do that. And one guy came to him and said, "Oh, you're insulting people or by you doing that in public." He said, "That I don't care. These people are cows." I said, "What?" He said, yeah, these people are, I don't care, they're stupid, they're something. So he said, you know, I want to prove it to you. So he stood up and he started telling the stories, and this story is mentioned in some of the books of hadith, that he stood up there and he started narrating hadith about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And at the end he said, if I heard the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if your tongue reaches the tip of your nose, you will enter Jannah. And people were amazed and believed it and stuff. He said, see, I told you. Me walking and eating is not an insult. These people, they don't know anything. So the point here, it was easy for an eloquent person to be able to narrate something and attribute that narration to the Prophet Muhammad. Some people, I heard some scholar that says people paid money. People paid money to narrate hadith. People that had certain abilities were given money to produce hadith about certain subject that were needed. So this science of they call it, you know, if you follow the books, if you follow the discussion about hadith, they call it the science of an'ana. So in Arabic you say an means attributed to Abdullah, an Sa'id, an. So it's the science of an'ana that produced what we have today, and the name of the books of an'ana has become very, very common. So the science of rijal, men, and emphasis on men here. It's the science of men to identify these people that narrated the hadith. And they categorize them, they give them different titles and different categories of level of truthness or circumstances, and told you before about jarh and ta'dil, saying this is not authentic, or you know, categorize this person, or give importance to this person. But it's just a human factor, and not only now we're different about it, but they from the beginning of hadith time, people that were involved in this issue, they had different opinions about themselves. They had different opinions about, like, this one guy, evaluation would be so great with one person and not so great with another person. Some person would say this guy is authentic and truthful. Some guy would completely dismantle him as a liar, as a liar, and as not authentic. So you know, you have Sahih Muslim is completely is different than Sahih Muslim study at Sahih Bukhari, as the story in history tells us. And his books are, he dismissed a lot of hadith that he believed that he heard from Imam Bukhari, and he evaluated people that you know, Imam Bukhari evaluated high, he evaluated them low, dismissed many hadith Imam Bukhari said. And the same thing for Imam al-Hakim, and before them, you know, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal was among the first, you know, in his book al-Muwatta, when he wrote about hadith. So the science, so-called science of studying the men of hadith, is just, look, it's not science. It's tribal, it's personal, it has human factors in it. It's not based on any look, it's not, it is just, there's so many different factors that could go either way, right, wrong, in the middle, completely disaster. It's opinion of men. It's the same thing at the time. Look, Imam al-Hafidh al-Dhahabi, Imam al-Hafidh al-Dhahabi, one of the biggest scholars at the time of Imam Bukhari, he accused Imam Bukhari of tadlis, fabricating. He accused him. It's in the books of Hadith. It's a story written, if you study about al-Hafidh al-Dhahabi, he said that about Imam Bukhari. So at the time, they even accused Imam Bukhari in his core Islamic beliefs because of his, some interpreted that he took the stand. Imam Bukhari took the stand that al-Quran, the pronouncement and pronunciation of the Quran, and the Quran pronunciation of the Quran, the Quran is created with its pronunciation, and they had different opinion, so they accused this. So they had, those people at the time, they had major problems among themselves. They attacked each other, let alone, I mean, Sunni and Shia. Like you take, the Shia, they have their own structure of hadith. Sunni completely reject that. Shia, they don't adhere to any of the Sunni established rules about hadith, or the men of the hadith, or even the same hadith. You read in Sahih Bukhari and you read it in the books of Shia, it's completely different narration, different story, different things. So it is a mess. It is a mess. There is a beautiful verses, there are beautiful stories in the books of hadith, but it's just a big mess. And there are a lot of people try to convince you it is divine. It's not divine. It's a book written by men for men. It is just it is in it. There's so many mistakes. So even Sahaba. Look, people are gonna accuse me of all kind of different things right now, but even Sahaba amongst themselves, they had disputes, they had problems, and they the Quran is plenty of time in the verses that explains to us about those things. And there is a story, I don't know if I said it before, yes, about Abu Huraira and Umar ibn al-Khattab. Umar ibn al-Khattab beat up Abu Huraira because Abu Huraira was put in charge by Umar ibn al-Khattab to rule the territory, what is known today as the Kingdom of Bahrain. And he was accused of becoming wealthy, and Umar ibn al-Khattab had an issue with that and questioned him and ended up beating him. And Abu Huraira he was afraid of narrating a hadith when Umar was alive, and he said so. So those are the people at that time. So we're going to keep going about the subject, but hopefully today's episode will alert you that it's not scientific, it's not science, that studying of those men that narrated the hadith, that you believe the Prophet said it, it's you doing a great disservice to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Our objective here in trying to understand the books of hadith is to defend the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam from the so many hadith that are attributed to him that he never said. Thank you very much, and God bless you, and Assalamu alaikum.